very good meeting, but at the same time, we will have to keep the time, and I will try to give everybody the chance to make a comment, and hopefully we'll have that time. Without any ado, Dragan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We have only 7 minutes, and I prepare everything in paper to stay in this frame. We gather at the moment when Europe is being reshaped, not only by external geopolitical pressures, but also by its own internal choices. And for those of us coming from the Western Balkans, this moment is not abstract. It is deeply personal. It defines the future of our societies, our democracies, and our place in Europe. Let me begin with Serbia. For Serbia to become a member of the European Union, it must be moving along the highway toward Brussels. And Serbia is on that highway, but it is moving in the wrong direction, and it is speeding up. Every day, it is getting closer to Erdogan's Turkey than to the European Union. That means it must take a U-turn at the first intersection and start heading the other way. And we are approaching that intersection. On one side, there is a growing democratic energy, visible in citizen mobilizations, student movements, and a renewed demand for accountability, justice, and dignity. On the other side, there is a regime that feels increasingly threatened and, as a result, increasingly repressive. As the largest opposition party, the Party of Freedom and Justice, has experienced this pressure directly. Our members and supporters have faced with physical violence, intimidation, and systematic smear campaign. Lives have been disrupted, reputation destroyed, and fear has been deliberately manufactured. Years of such pressure have not only targeted political actors, they have eroded public trust in political itself. Many citizens have turned away from traditional political structures and placed their hopes in the student movement, which does not have a clearly defined political program and does not take a clear position either for or against Serbia's membership in the European Union. And that is a problem, because on this issue you cannot be neutral. You are either for or against it. It is like when you go to a wedding and ask whether you take someone as your spouse. You can say yes or no. There is no well, maybe, I am not sure, perhaps under certain conditions, this is not important question. All of that means no. And there is no marriage. And this is the situation in Serbia. Unfortunately, for a large number of Serbian citizens, after 4 years of rule by Aleksandar Vučić, accompanied by the anti-European, pro-Russian and pro-Chinese campaigns, the issue of the European Union is no longer as important. Not only has support dropped from 67 to 33%, but even those who are in favor no longer believe that Serbia will ever become a member of the EU. This raises a crucial question for all of us. How do we rebuild trust between citizens, civil society, and political actors? How do we convince people that systematic change means a clear commitment to Europe? How do we ensure that democratic energy translates into sustainable political changes? Because without that bridge, even the strongest movements risk fragmentation. The European Union, and especially the European Parliament, must be clear and consistent in the support for democratic forces in Serbia. Too often, however, we see a different reality, tolerance, and sometimes even support for stabилocracy and authoritarian tendencies justified in the name of short-term stability. But stability without democracy is not stability, it is stagnation. We have heard many times how Ursula von der Leyen addresses the Serbian Orban, Aleksandar Vučić, as a dear Alexander, praising reforms in Serbia that simply do not exist. We constantly see dinners between Macron and Vučić that Serbia pays for the billions of euros, billions it does not have. 2 days ago, the Belgian Minister of Foreign Affairs visited Serbia. I ask why? Why visit a man whose regime operates like an organized criminal group that beats students, politicians, and citizens? Recent political developments in our neighborhood, including the election in Hungary, show that change is possible, even in systems that appear deeply entrenched. The campaign led by Peter Magyar has demonstrated that a clear pro-European stance, combined with a strong grassroots mobilization, can re-energize societies and create momentum for democratic renewal. The elections in Hungary have also shown that in Europe, the key is neither the United States, nor Russia, nor China, but the European Union. Magyar himself knows and understands this well. Well, he says to the pro-Orban TV anchor recently something we could easily say to, and he has expressed support for democratic change in Serbia. That is why we must speak openly about enlargement. Enlargement cannot remain a distant promise. In this current global context, marked by shifting centers of power, growing geopolitical competition, and increasing uncertainty, this may be the moment for the European Union to show courage and vision. The longer the process is delayed, the more public support for EU membership declines in our countries, especially among young people, and that is a loss not only for us, but for Europe. Our citizens deserve more than waiting room. We do not see ourselves as a burden to the European Union. On the contrary, the Western Balkans and the progressive political forces within it want to contribute. We want to bring ideas, energy, and commitment to a shared European future. At a time when global dynamics are increasingly shaped beyond the Atlantic, when the geopolitical center of gravity is shifting, Europe must consolidate its own strength. Completing the European project by fully integrating the Western Balkans is not an act of generosity, it is strategic necessity. Europe has historically been a driver of progress, of democratic governance, social justice, and human rights. But today, perhaps more than ever, it must actively defend and renew these principles. This requires reform. The European Union must become stronger, more decisive, and more coherent. And we, as a partner from the Western Balkans, want to be part of that transformation, not as a passive recipients, but as active contributors. We want to be allies in building a Europe that is globally competitive, internally resilient, and unwavering in its commitment to democracy and rights. A Europe that is not only a market, but a political community. A Europe that speaks with confidence of the global stage. A Europe that protects both collective and individual freedoms. Because ultimately, this is not only about institutions, it is about the people. It is about the belief that democracy matters, that fairness matters, that solidarity matters, and that these values belong to all our citizens, whatever they live in Belgrade, Skopje, Tirana, Budapest, or Podgorica or Barcelona. Let me conclude with this. The future of Europe will not be shaped by hesitation. It will be shaped by courage. The courage to defend democratic values, the courage to embrace enlargement, and the courage to act as one of the political community. The Western Balkans are ready. The question is Europe ready to move forward together? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we will leave it on the courage, so we can take the courage forward. I'd like only again to greet our colleagues from Croatia, the president of the Social Democratic Party of Croatia, and my colleague Joško, the international secretary. Venko, we were always proud of the progress that you have made in Macedonia when you were in government, and we have always supported your efforts. The situation has changed. Will you please?
Thank you for the invitation. Congratulations on the organization. Let me go through my notes first, and then I'll say a couple of words for North Macedonia. For a longer period of time, democracies in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, failed to foresee the upcoming authoritarian wave, and thus failed to undertake concrete policies to prevent a crisis at a such scale that we have today. The crisis of democracy began with the crisis of social democracy, and in general of the progressive forces, which is clear indication that the social democracy in its essence is the only true opposite to the anti-democratic and authoritarian ideologies and regimes. I'm stressing this because some of us still think that the resistance to authoritarianism among our colleagues from the center-right parties is as strong as among us progressives. Unfortunately, history teaches us that some of them, those political forces, may take the path of appeasement of the authoritarian political forces in a hope that they can put them under control by preventing their own voters to switch sides. That belief isn't only wrong, but also very dangerous because it legitimizes the far right and gives them opportunity to present them as a rational and moderate force for wider circle of voters. To conclude in this part, the heavy task of prevailing over this newest wave of authoritarian political forces is primarily on progressives and social democrats. The most important for the progressives is to undergo a process of fundamental transformation, both of narratives and policies, as well as of the approach to the voters in order to be electable again in the new political circumstances. As long as we think that nothing can change since the self-proclaimed end of history during the 90s of the last century, we will live in the illusion that there isn't alternative for us. The elections in the last years showed that more and more voters, especially from the working classes, are choosing the far right. They aren't doing that because they are essentially radical or fascist, but because they feel betrayed and abandoned by us, who are supposed to stand for them and their rights. For that purpose, we need to change the strategy. Instead of lecturing them about democracy, we have to prioritize the social and economic issues, connect them to their living standard and working conditions, and only then introduce the argument of democracy by building a narrative that only a democracy the workers can achieve a welfare society. Additionally, we need to position ourselves clearly against the new wave of unregulated capitalism masked as patriotism. The newest wave replaced the neoliberal policies with far more dangerous form of techno-feudalism. It is our failure that we are witnessing a situation where techno-feudalists are using the fears of the workers because of the globalization and migration, managed to gain their support and to utilize it for their own goals that they are completely opposite to the interests of the workers. I would like to also mention that progressives must not fall into the trap of letting bilateral issues, and this is in relation of enlargement of the European Union, that don't have direct connection to the Copenhagen criteria to be used as an excuse for vetoes and blockades. Every new veto or blockade is heavily damaging not only the process, but is undermining the trust of our citizens in the values of the EU. While Copenhagen criteria, including strict application of the rule of law and the good neighboring relations, shall be respected, that isn't a green card for unreasonable blockades. Let's show in these decisive moments of the process who is on the right side of the history. Let me finish by saying a couple of words about the situation of North Macedonia. You have rightly said that the things have changed after what social democratic government from the 2017 until 24 has done into the progress towards first NATO, which is a Finnish process, and then to the EU. We now have a right-wing government, which is completely against the integration of the country to the European Union. They're not proceeding with what is necessary to be done, and this is constitutional changes to implement Bulgarian minority, Croatian minority, other minorities in the preamble of the constitution, by saying that this is going to harm our national identity. The reality is that this is only an excuse because they want to proceed in their coalition with the Serbian President Vučić and until recently the Prime Minister of Hungary, Mr. Orban, who was completely controlling this axis from Budapest to Belgrade and to Skopje. Politically, financially, by needs and by media. We have get €1 billion of loan of Chinese money for the purposes that can be used in the same time from EU grants. Then the 40% of the media in the country is controlled not by Hungarian companies which are run by friends of Mr. Orban. Can you imagine the anti-European rhetoric? Can you imagine the black campaign? Can you imagine the fake news, the level of fake news which is spread around the country? This network of the media is also very dangerously used to increase inter-ethnic tensions. We have close to 30% Albanian majority. And this is not a joke. In a time when serious progress is made by Montenegro, by Albania, with which we are seeing that the Europe has changed strategy. It was Denmark ambassador who came to present last year the priorities of the European Union, and she said openly, listen, we were against enlargement. Now with the new situation in geopolitics, we are for. You have to use this momentum. So unfortunately, just to conclude, and not to take much of the time, we're fighting autocracies, not in general in the world, but we are fighting locally. We cannot even approach the system of European Union, which is going to help us to gain more power and more instruments to fight authoritarian regime in the country. So we are back in the time of former regime of Mr. Gruevski, who is now fugitive, and Mr. Orban was keeping him until now. Now Mr. Magyar is saying, no, we're not going to keep him anymore, but our government is not asking formally for him to come back and to serve his sentences in the prison. So, just to conclude, I think only together we are stronger, and this is why I think this type of meetings means a lot and can mean that we can share knowledge, experience on how to fight our mutual challenges in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venko, for bringing us into the heart of the problem, and that is how to deal both with authoritarian regimes, but also, I think at this point in time with Magyar in power, we'll see how it will go, but the question is decontamination of Orban's influence in the region, and which will be very difficult because of the corruption, because of the financial implications, let alone the democratic impact or not illiberal impact that they have made. So yes, thanks for bringing the process back home that we have to take up. See, Gender Network works on a parity basis, working on gender equality on a parity basis, and we have two colleagues here, Romina Kuko and Kathleen van Brent. But I would like to greet my women colleagues who are here. Fanny first, the deputy of the Social Democratic Union, Marinika Tepic, member of parliament and from the Party of Freedom and Justice. I also greeted Tamara Tripic, our Secretary General, Mateja, who is a great colleague at the Social Democratic Party, Dragana. No, you're not a minority. By chance, at this
we have to fight for our rights now.
We'll fight together. Let's fight together. And of course, Anna Tupeska from Macedonia, who works with me in the Scientific Council of the FEPS. So, greetings to all of you, and let's do the parody stuff. Romina, thank you so much. You are always a great board member and a great supporter. Thank you. I will give you the...
Does it work? Yes, it does. Thank you, Dasha. Dear friends, I never thought I would speak ahead of the European Parliament, but here we are. Well,
agreed, Catherine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, it's very interesting because I was listening to the speeches, and they're absolutely right. But I think that we're repeating ourselves for years and years and years when it comes to enlargement. We always have unconditional support for the European integration process, and always we have a but wait from the European Union for our countries. In the next 2 hours, I have another panel which is called Where Does Europe End? And I'm thinking about what am I going to say there, but I think that Europe ends where hypocrisy starts, and I'm going to be very blunt. In the sense that the Western Balkans, it's not in the very, let's say, in the end kilometer of European continent. It's in the middle of it. If we see the map, there is this beautiful continent. Sorry to speak like Trump now, but we have there like an area which is not blue and yellow. but it's a gray area, and this is the Western Balkans. It's in the middle, in the heart of it. We are surrounded by European Union countries. In order to go from Italy to Greece, you have to pass through this gray area and then join again the European Union map. So what does it mean? Why is our region portrayed like it's in the very end of the European continent? Not even culturally, because for centuries, we have embraced the European culture. We have been part of the European history. We have been part of the great happenings in the European history. Why are we considered continuously as a region that but needs to fulfill a lot of conditions? We have to understand the world as it is, and of course that yesterday is over, and unfortunately multilateralism is over. The Western Balkans, the whole of it is 17 million inhabitants, the whole of it. Its economy, it's lower than Bavaria. So even if we have an integration of the whole region in the European Union, that wouldn't mark a significant difference when it comes to the large European continent. But we continue to hear, but wait, there are conditions, there are roadmaps, and so forth. We understand that very much. But on the other hand, we know that the process is not technical, but it's also political. And every time that EU says, but wait, China and Russia see an opportunity, see a window of opportunity, which is, of course, translated in action. I was listening to the media aspect on contaminating the social media, the minds of the people. And this is what Alexander Spasov mentions as active measures, methods from the KGB in the 70s, which are being used in our region again. So what do we do about it? How cannot we understand that with the threat that we have to multilateralism right now, we don't have to lie to ourselves. We are going into a multipolar world. The states, the big states, are starting to compete with each other. And whoever is losing now is a small state. Before the multilateralism, a strong EU, a strong UN, a strong OSCE, and all this multilateral, a strong NATO, used to ensure that the rules applied for all the countries, and that the big and strong and powerful countries were susceptible to those rules as well. But now, in this changing world, we are seeing zones of influence that our countries are not immune to. So I think that this is the main discussion that we have to do inside, internally with ourselves, and then with our population. Now, why are the populists gaining ground and winning elections? I think it's for a simple reason, because we are letting territory. It's simple. And in the moment that you concede territory, it's strategy. Of course that in power there is no vacuum. There is no vacuum whatsoever. If there is a momentarily vacuum in power, we know that it's going to be filled immediately by a certain power and a certain force that exists in there. So how do we gain our territory back, and how do we gain our power back? I think that the progressive and the social democrats have become so philosophically, let's say, refined that we continue to have thoughts and ideas about how the ideal world should be, while the rest of the people act. So I think that is the moment to start acting. And the moment to start acting, it's first of all in the internal politics. Something that is not mentioned in our region, but coming from the Ministry of Interior, working for 8 years there, I noticed something very strange and very interesting. Our countries have reformed a lot of things. They have reformed sectors of economy and agriculture, the soft power. They have reformed the army because NATO wanted to do so, but they haven't reformed the intelligence services. So in our countries, coming from that kind of past, without reforming the intelligence services, it will be next to impossible to gain pure and sheer effect and impact of the social democratic values. So I think that especially my generation, which doesn't have any sins from the past, should be more daring into asking questions and into asking how these services work and how do they support old politicians and how the old ties linking the region again and again and again are being kept strong, and how these ties are linked with non-Western powers. Because of course we have to know that if we say there is a Chinese or Russian influence in the region, then of course they will have their, let's say, mechanisms there. So who enables that? Who are the enablers of these mechanisms? Only when we have these answers and we take these kind of active measures into asking questions in governance, then we will nip the problem in the bud. I mentioned the fall of multilateralism, and I think that progressives, especially even our countries, should be staunch supporters of multilateralism. We cannot allow a world that it's like the Prime Minister of Canada said, Carney, big countries do what they can, and small countries suffer what they should. I'm not saying we are in the brink of that, but when I see threats of NATO, I am horrified. I am absolutely horrified because for the reasons that we understand. So going back to the European Union for us, it's the only plan that we have. We have no plan B. And in the moment that the train goes away, then this will call, I'm not saying disaster, but this will call a very tough and big winter for the region. Even the idea of the European Union, especially in our citizens, leaves the opportunity for us to do strong reforms. And when we wait a little bit more from Brussels, you can understand that the fatigue is quite large. But on the other hand, it's not only a political project, but it's a security project. And I'm not talking here about military security. I'm talking here about legal security. I'm talking about economical security. I'm talking about the security of the regions. We have to know that the Western Balkans is suffering from a phenomenon which we don't talk enough internationally, even though we talk in our houses, which is depopulation. And we know that depopulation in a country is one of the main reasons of the, let's say, the weakening of that kind of the country. So for us, the EU is the only, as I say, the only plan. But I think that a new discourse is needed to be done with the European Union. We should change now a little bit the way that we address, because now it's like we fulfill criteria and then we have one country setting other criteria. The only criteria we have are the Copenhagen criteria. And I think that our countries, in a certain degree, have fulfilled those criteria. Now is the moment to act, because you have two active wars, which are one is in the European continent, the other one is very close to projection of power in the European continent. And talking about influences in the region, this region is not very, let's say, not safe, but immune. Sorry to have this very grim discourse on my side, but I think that it's very important that we ask some questions, and it's very important that we start acting accordingly to the needs of the time and not only accordingly to the theory, because this is the time of courage. If we miss the courage, then the future is not going to belong to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, it's not, it's grim, but it's forward-looking. So when you have the opening opportunities, it's great. And there is a message here that is also the message that we see outside, and that is together. And what we are trying to say, let's do it together, let's enlarge and do it together. And now, Catherine, you've got a tall task here.
Yeah, that's absolutely impossible.
It
is impossible.
Yes,
yes. No, first of all, I'm happy to see all of you, and I think it's I'm an optimist by nature, but I am, although we are in sometimes, no, not sometimes, quite in gloomy situations, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism, and let me start with that. Yes, good. But first of all, you know, the global progressive mobilization, it's good to start with that. This is an initiative that started with Pedro Sanchez and the Spanish socialists. And it's very important that we have a close look at it. Of course, it's also about networking, meeting up, but this is, in essence, reconnecting with the DNA of social democracy. We always have been internationalists. You know, we are the internationalists. We are the ones who say, look, there are borders and member states and nation states, but overall, what unites us is social democracy, progressive thoughts, and with that comes multilateralism, democracy, and all these very important values. But we did forget to work on that. The last couple of, it's for decades, right. And it's for historians to put that in the right perspective, but we know that we haven't been working on that at all. There is the Socialist International, there are other organizations, they do not function anymore as they should. So this is a starting point of the rebuilding that, and I hope everybody's really convinced of that. That means that we need to put energy, money, means into that process. Otherwise, we will not succeed, and we're not succeeding. And you all talked about the far right and the threat of far right. And let me start by saying I'm from Belgium. You know, Belgium, small country, one of the founding fathers of Europe. But the Flemish part of Flanders, where I'm from, has been faced with far right for 30 years now. So it's lesser known, everybody knows the situation in France, but it's quite comparable to France in the sense that we have for a very long time extreme right in the center of our political system. By the way, just as a side note, they never ever gained power in Belgium because we installed and invented the cordon sanitaire, and it's not always nice, but it works. Okay, that's a side note. But important, because if you let extreme right come to power, either by coalition or like, I'll come back to Hungary a little bit later on, but like in Hungary, then you know what will happen. Not only your social system, but also women's rights, also everything that relates to democracy, everything will be torn down. The far right, and that's new, I see that also in my country, the far right always has had a fascistic, anti-migration, discriminatory discourse. But they were on themselves, operating in France, in the Netherlands, in the Western Balkans. They united, and they did what we lacked to do the last couple of decades. They started unifying. And if you look to what Trump is doing, it's textbook Orban. But then instead of taking 16 years for that, he's taking only a few years for that. First term, and now in the second term, full-fledged ahead. And important for us, but we know, but important for us to always take into account the agenda of Trump is the exact same agenda as of Putin, and the exact same agenda of Orban, Vucic, and other same. And that's also something that we have to work on and build counter-narratives on is very important. So that brings me to multilateralism. Romina, you said multilateralism is over. Right. I do not believe that. I think multilateralism, as we have known it, might be over in the sense that we need to reinvent that. Multilateralism is excellent. We established that. By the way, it was mainly the United States who pushed after the Second World War to go into a multilateral world. But it always has been, of course, imperfect. If the global south or upcoming economies and states like India do not have the place they deserve in multilateralism, then they will go against it. So we have to reinvent it but I think we need to be optimistic that we will keep it, will keep the multilateral system. But it will only happen if we organize ourselves and if we take that partnerships around the world. And that is what is happening now. And I have to say, I have a lot of critics often on how Europe operates, especially when it comes to Gaza and the Middle East. But when it comes to establishing new partnerships, we are advancing. I was recently in India. We have a free trade agreement with India. And if you would have asked me a year or a year and a half ago, is it possible to have a free trade agreement with India? I would have said, no, of course not with India. You know, that country is extremely protectionistic. It's not capable of doing that, and it happened. We can reshape that. Of course, it also happened because India was faced with the crazy Trump administration and a lot of problems with China. When I was there, and I literally said, for us, Europe is a beacon of trust and reliability. And that is what we have to keep on working to reinvent that multilateral system. And that brings me to enlargement. But because how can you work on new partnerships and not enlarge? It's part of that new way forward. And I have to say, when you said about the Danish ambassador, it doesn't surprise me, I have to say, but it also annoys me. It really annoys me. But it's true, eh? Geopolitics is helping us to get more people on board to do what they do. But I expect from a socialist government in Denmark that they support from the start enlargement. Because we do not, of course it will, let's hope it will make it easier to do the enlargement process now because of the geopolitics. Let's use it, let's not waste time. But we, Social Democrats, and we lacked also the energy and the courage to do so, but we Social Democrats, when I talk of DNA, enlargement is part of that DNA because it's that internationalism, is the fact that you broaden the European Union, you take more people on board, the socio-economics. We are here in Spain, you look at this wonderful city, but you also see a very prosperous city. You go to Madrid, you go to Sevilla, more in the south, you see a country that is advancing. Yeah? You see the progress happening here. By the way, when I was in India, I also saw a lot of progress. And one of the reasons, no, maybe the main reason, is that I'm part of that big European Union. The European Union's success is not just the market, it's the fact that we all do our economies together, and we still have a long way to integrate, and it's far from perfect, but it is the creation of our wealth, and that creation of our wealth is the basis of our social security, and so on and so on. So that is what we have to do. And it's, we have the Willy Brandt program, and if you want more, I can give you more, but I'm going to stop after a few more sentences because we need to take questions. But I think it's important that you know that we work in the S&D group really very intensively on the enlargement process, and we're now in the middle of discussing how can we make sure that we succeed in the coming years with the first, and then with Ukraine, and I haven't talked about Serbia, but we will talk about Serbia later. Of course, the basis of all of that is that we cannot compromise. We cannot compromise on the fundamentals. And Dragan, he knows that very well, and I don't think you want to move in that direction. But it still also remains the basis of that enlargement process. Final point that I would want to make on that is that we as S&D today in the European Parliament, but also with our broad family, we have a huge task ahead of us. And we might think the most difficult part is the chapters and the process and what flexibility do we need. And I think the major task that we have is to convince our public opinion that this is a positive way forward, because you cannot go against your public opinion. And there we still have a long way to go. And I still have to say something about Serbia, because I learned to love the country in the last. I just started working on enlargement in the S&D 2 years ago, but I think Serbia really conquered my heart in the sense that if you see what is happening over there, the students the protest, but also the professors, the process, and that is what we need to support. And you see what happened Saturday, Sunday in Hungary. That should give us so much optimism, because even after 16 years, after almost no leftovers, all the people in Hungary that I spoke said, look, if Orban wins, it's the full-fledged end of democracy, without any media freedom anymore, no independent judiciary, and so on and so on. And non-stop foreign interference and brainwashing of people, non-stop, and still they, with more than 50%, with a two-thirds majority now in the parliament, change, and it will change. You will see the change in your countries in the next coming weeks, months, and years, and that is the basis of a lot of hope in front of us.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine. And I would say amen to that, and the use of the momentum. I think that was one of the messages, yes. And I think we need to do that. Therefore, I will give the last word to Wenko. I'm very sorry, but we are being pushed out of the room, obviously. Really? Yeah, they are telling us that we have to leave, but I will only ask Wenko to announce the next step.
Very briefly, thank you.
Very briefly.
We are going to organize a regional meeting in Skopje. You're all invited. We're going to send the invitation this coming week. Skopje Initiative, it is a meeting in which we are all going to talk about integration of the region in Europe, then fight against corruption and against authoritarian regimes. So we'll have time to talk more then.
We'll certainly...
June 6th in Skopje.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to push out of the room there.
Yeah, and the Willy Brandt program will be with us. I'm very sorry to all our colleagues, but please, colleagues, there will be another opportunity at the Cortula School that I will ask the representatives of the parties to take a collective photo outside, and also that we can then discuss the further steps. Yeah. Thank you very much. There in front of the, in front of the, thank you. What is this? We got an hour. Yes. We got an hour. And then we got an hour, and then they said, no, you have to get out.
It's not nice, people cannot take any comments.
No, but...
Email.
Yeah. Yes. Shall I put my mobile? Please text me.
I will text you.
Yeah. But the email is also good if you want to give information.
I will do both.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.